All right, welcome back to my channel. We are here for a fun case today, the final case in the 2024 Microsoft Excel World Championship, the World of Warcraft case. Now, I've not played World of Warcraft before. Maybe you have. Maybe that's what's brought you to this channel. But what this case involves is calculating the stats for 20 players. So every level has 20 questions. Every question relates to a player, and the levels continue building on each other all throughout the case. It's a different kind of format, a very slightly different format, but it's going to be fun. So this video is going to be a timed attempt. I have 40 minutes on the timer, which players had 40 minutes to solve the case. And I'm going to see how far I can get. At the end of the video, I'd like to compare my score with the live player scores, but keep in mind, I'm playing in the comforts of my own home. The live players had to play on stage with all the lights and all the cameras and all the crowd shouting. So may not be a fair comparison, but I like to give this case a try. Let's see how it turns out. And here we go. Okay. So I'm going to start this case by calculating the experience points level. So you see in level 1, I need to determine what their level is based on the XP they already have. So I'm going to start a new sheet, and based off the information that was given in the introduction video, I am going to calculate the XP needed for each level here. So you notice that I set myself up for 100 levels. I'm not sure at this point how far we are going to go. I feel 100 is a safe bet. I'm using dynamic arrays so that just in case it's not, I can change that. So I'm using my formula now to calculate the levels. But I notice here they're all wrong, which, by the way, I'm going to hide that column because I'm supposed to be running this blindly. So two reasons why this calculation is wrong. Number one, it takes 400 XP points to get to level 2. Number two, it takes 12.5% more points to get to level 3. So my calculation currently has 400 for level 2 and 450 for level 3. But it should actually be 400 for level 2, 850 for level 3, 1,300 and some odd for level 4, and so on. So I need a sum function here to add these up properly. Now these add up correctly, and I can move on to the next level. Now at this point, what I'm thinking is that since I'm following the characters from level to level, I am going to create a sheet which has this character's information on it. And then I can use that sheet across the levels and just simply update their information with each question. The answers did not copy over correctly because my formula didn't copy over correctly. But we've already put our answers on the answer sheet, so that's not too terribly important. Now I'm going to use this information to move on to level 2. So in level 2, we need to complete this list of quests. And we want to complete that list of quests so that our characters can reach level 40 based on their XP. And each character, depending on their race, is going to go to different locations to complete their quests. So I have to take the quest list and sort it properly for these locations to fit. And the question is asking not how many XP they're going to have or what level they're going to be, but rather how much gold are they going to have after completing the appropriate number of quests to reach level 40. So what I'm doing here is I'm calculating the 6 locations that each character will need to go to. I'm using an index function to calculate that. I based the index function off of class instead of race, so that's why there was an error. Now I have all the locations that all of the characters will go to. Here what I'm doing is I'm just quickly calculating how many quests are at each location. Are they the same or are they different? Because that can tell me how easily I can set up this guide. I saw that there were 20 quests at each location, so I think there's an easy way to set up my model. Now what I'm doing is I'm bringing the question numbers over from level 2, so that when I build my data table, I'm using the correct numbers. Now what I'm doing here is I'm going to filter this quest list based off of the first location that each character is going to. So I'm going to put my locations on this 26th row here. They're not in there yet, but I will be putting them in there now. And since I'm running through a data table, I'm going to set up this area that will run through all of the data on this sheet. I will then put the locations in here. And now you see my first 20 locations have arrived. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to simply repeat that process for all 6 locations. And what I did with this formula is I just let it run through 20, and then 1 through 20, and then 1 through 20. So here I have the second location. And then I can easily copy and paste and just simply change that column letter for each one. Now that I have all 6 entered, I'm going to take my headings and bring them over to this sheet so that I can know what each item is referring to. I'm going to check the rules here to see what this level needs. There's quite a lot of instructions with this final case. So here I'm creating an additional column which will keep track of how much gold was collected. Now, using a range in this way with the sum is not going to work. It's always going to sum all of the numbers. So I basically have to do it quest by quest. Now I'm going to do the same to keep track of the XP. Here I'm just going to simply calculate what is the level 40 XP so that I know when to stop completing the quests. And this reminds me of the bonus for number 1, which is how much XP do you need to get to level 40? So I'm going to answer that one very quickly. The question asks us to round up, so I'm going to use the round up function for this. So now what I'm doing is I'm figuring out when do I hit that level 40? When do I have the right amount of XP? And so that's when true is going to come up in this hit level column I've created. So now that I see where that's happening, I'm checking my gold calculation and I'm noticing that it's not matching the example. This is when I notice that it's probably not the best idea to simply use one sheet and just continue going again and again, because this sheet did not bring my gold amount over because I never had to calculate it before. Now, as I'm trying to figure out a way to kind of shove this in, I'm noticing that it's just not simply working well with the data that I have. I have to do a lot of adjusting, a lot of shifting. For some reason at this point, it's changing my highlight. I have to undo my paste and eventually get myself enough space where I can bring all the characters' information over. I'm going to bring the headings over as well because those have changed and that can help me understand what I'm looking at better. Now I'm recalculating the gold column and I'm going to check again if this matches the example answer. And now it does. So I'm going to go ahead and create my data table telling me how much gold do I have when I hit true for the hit level column. And because the question is asking how much silver instead of gold, I have to multiply by that figure by 100. Now I go on to level 3. So with level 3, there is mining involved. Every week we mine a different mineral and we mine a different amount on it. So I'm going to delete everything on this sheet. And because I've learned in the past that simply continuing on the previous information is not going to work well, I am just simply going to start from scratch. Now I notice that I need to bring over how much XP I have in addition to how much gold I have. So I'm going to recalculate my data table to add that in. And as I calculate this table, I notice there's something odd with the data. They're all very round. This is because I forgot to include the starting XP for each character. So I add that in, recalculate the data table again, and now these numbers are matching what I need. So I bring in the XP and the gold amount over into this level. Now once again, I calculated silver instead of gold, so I have to divide it by 100. Now I go through, clear out all the information on that sheet, and start with a new sheet for level 3. Level 3 now involves mining. Every week I'm going to mine a certain resource, and every week we're going to mine a certain amount of that resource. And at the end of the week, we're going to take the stacks of that resource and sell them on the market. Every day, the price for the resource is different, and every week, the number of stacks that we bring is different. Now, in this level, what they've done to show the data is they've used color coding. This is something that we saw in last year's finals as well. And this then involves a process where we need to take each color and replace it with the resource name or an identifier for it. So here I am reading the instructions for this level. There's a lot of instructions to read. And this was probably one of the toughest parts about this case, was that there was a lot to read and a lot to understand in a short amount of time. So here I'm going to take a trick that I learned from Lorenzo, and I'm just taking a screenshot of the instructions and bringing them over to this sheet, so I can refer back to them as I am working. Once again, I'm setting up my data for the data table. And I've created a setup where I'm going to go through 52 weeks. And I'm going to go through how much I've mined every week for those 52 weeks. I've got a start date and an end date for each week. The end date is the date that we are going to sell the minerals. So it's important to keep track of that. Now I'm going to copy this over, but only keep the colors. And I'm going to use find and replace by cell format to replace those cells with the name of the resource that's being mined. Many players nowadays have custom functions that can help do this for them, but it's quite difficult as you cannot access the style of the cell through a standard Lambda function. You have to use VBA to actually get this information and present it on the sheet. Now that we have all the minerals identified, we can add this information into our table. Now I'm trying to use a way to copy and paste this range easily across the cells, but it's not working very well for me. Now I'm going to add a column for the starting amount because I'm reminded that we mine units but sell stacks, which means there may be some units left over from the week that we might sell again in a later week. Now I'm bringing out the amount that I've mined into the sheet. Once again, trying to copy that down as well, but copying and pasting ranges is not working. So instead, I've decided to simply reference the cell 5 cells above and fill that down. Here I'm calculating how many stacks I have and how many minerals left over I have. Now the sales price I'm going to bring from this resource prices sheet here. Every row is a different date, every column is a different mineral. So there's the sales price for that resource on that date. And now we're going to calculate how much gold we've earned on that week. This final column is where I'm going to keep track of the total amount of gold that we have earned through mining. Here, I'm going to create an XLOOKUP function to look up how much copper was left over the last time that we mined it. So in order to find the last time, because XLOOKUP normally looks top to bottom, we are going to do -1 for search mode, which makes it search from last to first. I notice a slight error in my stacks calculation because I didn't consider the starting amount. I'm noticing the same error for the leftover because I have a negative number here, which I should not have. Now here I'm checking because Excel tells me I have an inconsistent formula. But after manually checking the formulas, I found that this is what I want. I once again create another hit target column so I can keep track of when I reach my target of 90 gold. So what these instructions say is I need to reach 90 gold to purchase a particular item, then purchase that item, and then how much gold do I have afterwards. So here I'm going to create a data table to make that calculation. So I'm going to find where do I hit 90, turn this into the number of silver, because it's silver that I'm calculating, and then figure out how much silver I have left over after purchasing the item. Now I'm checking the numbers that I have on this case. And something doesn't seem to add up right to me. So here I'm going to check an individual question to see what has happened. Here I've caught that I've not highlighted the correct cells for the resource. So I'm going to highlight that again, recalculate my answers, and put the answers in. The reason why I noticed that the numbers weren't adding up was because this case gave clues for the first 3 answers, and my answers did not match those clues. Once again, I'm going to bring the information to the following level to start calculating this one. I'm going to check level 2 to make sure my answers match those hints, and they seem to, so I'm going to continue on. So in this level, we are going to go on quests again. But in these quests, we are going to look for specific quests to collect a certain game stat and try to reach a target level for that game stat. Here I'm resetting my character sheet again. I'm going to copy all the information from this level as a screenshot to that character sheet. I'm going to copy this game stats table over as well because this is going to be important for our calculations. Here I'm taking a look at the level 4 quests. Now I noticed my information didn't copy over correctly, so I'm going to copy and paste values to make sure that it's in there. Here I'm going to target the game stat and level for the characters that I'm looking up. Now to make things easier so I don't have to go back and forth all the time, I'm going to copy the entire table and bring it over to this sheet. That way I have the instructions and the data all next to each other. Now each quest produces a certain item, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the item information to the right of this quest table so that I know exactly what item each quest provides and what stats are related to that item. Now, something interesting to XLOOKUP is that when you XLOOKUP a range, it's not going to return multiple columns. So if you want it to return multiple columns, you can only look up an individual cell. Now at this point, I'm noticing there's some odd zeros in my data table, which tells me that there's probably some cells that I did not lock properly when writing the formula. Unfortunately, my score sheet is blocking my formula, but I've gone ahead and locked in those cells. I'm going to move the data table over to the left side now. So what I need to do is I need to find out which quests each player is going to complete and in which order. So that's first going to involve filtering the quests for those that this certain class can complete. Now some quests are open to multiple classes. So the way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to use a isNumber search combination, which basically tells me, does this group of text exist within the cell? It doesn't matter where, I just want to know that if it exists or not. I am going to put this table in a let function so that it will be easier for me to work with, because I'm going to have to reference this multiple times. I need to sort this table according to the instructions. So the first instruction is to sort by which one gives the highest amount of stats. So the first sorting order is by the highest number of stats. The second sorting order is the highest amount of XP. Got to be careful with these long formulas, as you need to make sure that your parentheses are lining up where you want them to. Now I have the quests lined up and sorted in the order that the player would attempt them. So now I can start calculating how much of their target stat the player has accumulated. I am also going to calculate how much gold, because I do believe that the question in this round is asking how much gold does the player have after they reach their target stat level. Going to do the same thing for XP, because the later levels will require me to keep track of the XP. Once again, I'm going to calculate my hit target column so I know which row do I need to take the data from. And now that I found my match, I'm going to go ahead and create my data table so that I can run through all the characters using this calculation. I'm going to calculate how much XP, as that's actually the question that this level is asking. The other stats we still need to calculate because, again, later levels will ask the questions. Now, at this point, I have about 5 minutes left. I don't know if I'm going to be able to complete level 5 with only those 5 minutes. But I'm still going to calculate all of the stats using this data table so that I can at least start copying them over and then get that ready to start working on the next level. So here I'm going to look up the gold. Here I'm going to look up the stat accumulation, and here I'm going to run through the table. So in level 5, our characters are now going to complete dungeons. And each dungeon is going to present us with rewards. And so we need to calculate all of the dungeons that we go through as we try to reach experience level 60. Keep track of the rewards from each dungeon, because most of them we're actually going to sell back. We only want to keep the one reward that is most useful for the character. So here's the list of dungeons for level 5. And the way that it works is each character will run through the dungeon again and again and again until they have enough experience to go to the next level dungeon. And every time they do it, they're going to get a different prize. Now, noticing that I'm not going to have enough time, I'm going to go back to the bonuses. And bonus 2 asks how many W's are in the level 2 quest names. That's a very simple length and substitute combination that will help me calculate the number of that certain letter in each quest. Add these letters together, and we get the answer for bonus 2. So you see here, the first visit to the Scarlet Monastery, the reward would be a Ravager. The second visit, the reward would be a Torturing Poker. And in the third visit, the reward would be an Illusionary Rod. And we'll just simply continue going through that cycle every time we visit that dungeon. So I'm going to bring this dungeon information over to this sheet. Start preparing my data for a data table later. And now time is up. Out of the 4 levels that I was able to complete, including the 2 bonuses, I've reached a total of 697 points. But the way that I earned those points is quite odd. When I look at my score sheet, I notice that I have almost none from level 2, half of level 3, but still managed to get all the points for level 4, which is quite odd. I'm going to have to go back and investigate how did that happen on this sheet. But first, I want to see how my score compares with those who were actually on stage. Now, when you see the score sheet, the first thing to keep in mind is that for the first 30 minutes, every 5 minutes in that time frame, the lowest score was eliminated. And it's no surprise that about 20 minutes in, I would have been that lowest score. But let's be real. If I was on stage, I probably would have been eliminated a lot earlier, and in some ways I actually was. But nonetheless, a big congratulations goes out to Michael Jarman for winning the competition, but also for all of these competitors for making it to the final round and being on stage. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. I hope to upload a complete solve next week. Keep an eye out for that, and I'll see you then.